Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Schools Forum meeting. We'll make a rapid start. And Simon, have we had any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we received apologies from Philip Siddell, but he's asked that Tim Hopkins be his second, although Tim is actually on the committee already, so that's fine. We've had apologies from Sadie Jones, Mark Davis, Kerry Jefferson, Chris Dobson, Ian Turnbull and Nikki Clifton. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that anybody would like to make at this juncture? If you could raise your electronic hand. Good-o. Moving on to item 3 then. The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of November. First thing we will do will be to check for points of accuracy. So rather than go through page by page, obviously everybody will have had the opportunity to have read through them in advance. So if you have any queries about accuracy, again, if you could raise your electronic hand and we'll deal with those as they come along. Steve Swatton.
Hi. Just one slight issue. On page 4, where it says notice for concerns, it says the report indicated only one primary school had a licence deficit. I think we need to add in that an additional school, because other schools will already have licence deficits, but they will have been previously noted, if you know what I mean.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, that's a valid point. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other points of accuracy? Okay, thank you very much for that, Steve. We'll move on to item 4 then in that case, matters arising. Now, Steve Barr had raised 2 separate points on matters arising. So, Steve, for the benefit of everybody else in the meeting, could I ask you to raise the query that you had initially around new schools and existing academies?
Yes, thank you, Alan. I mean, Tim might want to come in on the back of this, but it's an update really, rather than a query or a question. There's a reference on page 4 to the possibility of new schools becoming local authority maintained schools rather than academies, and also the question about whether schools which are already academies, whether relationship with a existing trust for one reason or another are broken down, might be taken back into the local authority. Academies, and also the question about whether. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. I don't know if anyone else is. We pursued this down various routes, and the advice was that this was something for the local authority to take up with the regional DFE contact, and I know that Tim has done that, and the advice, I think, and I say Tim will perhaps enlarge on this, was that we need to wait for the white paper, which I'm now told is due in the second week of February, and it was also raised at this week's Trades Union Consultative Committee, which involves currently the acting leader of the County Council and the Chief Exec, and that same response went to them. So it's really just to report that it has been followed up. It's in a bit of limbo at the moment, but hopefully we'll be able to get some sort of clearer answer before too long. As I say, Tim's been involved in this. He might want to elaborate or contradict.
No, you're right, Steve. So the response that we got from the DFE is exactly as you've just described. The DFE are waiting for the new white paper. And what it says is, should any application by a local authority be made, any decision is likely to be delayed until the education white paper is published. So that's not to say that applications couldn't be made, but any decisions taken by the department would be delayed until the publication of the white paper.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, Steve, you had a second query again regarding the wraparound care element.
Yeah, I mean, I just wondered that was item 7 on page 5, where I know that with Christmas and New Year having intervened, our last meeting was relatively recent, but whether there was any update on the figures we were given about the uptake and the potential underspend, and what was going to happen if we did underspend to the funding that had been on offer.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Steve. So I had an update from Kevin Taylor, who's provided the reports previously, and he's provided the update which says the Department for Education has confirmed that the wraparound childcare programme will end on the 31st of March 2026, and we should not fund any additional places after this date. And then he's also then goes on to say that although year 1 funding could be carried over, any additional year 2 funding can only be used if all year 1 funding has been fully spent or formally committed. And then he then goes on to say again, we are now confident that this requirement has been met and have submitted an interim statement of grant expenditure. And then he further goes on to say that we are requesting additional activity cost funding to support a second year of the wraparound inclusion pathway training. This will enable us to fund the remaining successful applications we have already received, as well as those we anticipate receiving. The estimated activity cost for year 2 is circa £200,000. And then lastly, he then says a small amount of funding may be available to be carried forward into 26-27 to support the provision, but this will be minimal.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. I mean, it's reassuring to know that we are actually, it now looks as if we're not going to be penalised for not having spent our full potential allocation. Could I just ask that at an appropriate time, this perhaps goes into the work programme, that whether it's the next meeting or a subsequent meeting, we get a further update on that, because I think it's important and of interest.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. One of the things that I would also say is that I've asked Kevin to provide an update, particularly around numbers, and hopefully that'll be available for LMSCC next week.
There was a further matter arising that Simon, you wanted to raise?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So it's just a really quick one that's been brought to my attention today. So it's under matters arising with regard to membership of the forum. So we obviously have a representative from Maintained Prue. At the moment, that is Kerry Jefferson. I was contacted this morning to say that member was going to change, or that representative was going to change to Sarah Bamber, who I believe will be watching the webcast now. So it's just to note at this meeting, and I'll record it in the minutes, that there will be a change in membership, and Sarah will be joining us at the next meeting. That's all it was. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, are there any other matters arising that anybody wants to raise? If you could just do that by raising your electronic hand, please. Okay, we shall then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a decision taken by the Chair under delegated powers, and I can confirm that I haven't taken any actions under that particular set of powers, which leads us on to item 6, notices of concern and licence deficit agreements, and at this point I'll hand over to Mel.
Good afternoon. It's our standing item paper from Entrust relating to notice of concerns and licence deficits. Since the last forum, we have issued a notice of concern to Burton Prue for a forecast deficit in 26-27.
Thank you, Mel. Any questions from anybody? No, short, sweet one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7 then. Luke, the verbal update on school budgets 26-27.
Yeah, thank you. So this report provides an update on the DSG allocation for 26-27. In the past, it has just been a verbal update. However, this time around, we've managed to put together a report with the key information. So I won't go through it line by line this time around, and instead I'll just highlight some of the key points in each section. Beginning with the schools block, totaling £726 and 9 million, 0.9 million. So the schools budgets will again be set using the national funding formula. The minimum funding guarantee is expected to be set at the maximum permissible level of 0%, with affordability managed through the per pupil gains cap, which is estimated to be around 2.8%. This will be challenged and ultimately agreed by the DFA before we can confirm the final schools block budget share for 26-27. And it's also worth saying in this part that the request to transfer 0.5% of the schools block DSG to high needs has been approved by the Secretary of State. Moving on to the central school services block, which is 5.9 million. So this is funding allocated to local authorities to carry out central functions on behalf of pupils. It's separate to the schools block and is not deducted from schools budgets. It's split into two areas. So we've got historic commitments. The funding here is now reduced to lower than the £924,000 required to fund prudential borrowing. So we have applied to the DFE for funding protection on this. The other area is the ongoing commitments allocation, which is 5.2 million. We are forecasting an underspend of approximately £0.5 million in this area, and this will be transferred to the DSG deficit. Then at the early years block of £166.1 million. So at 26-27 is the first full year of all the new entitlements. I think it's worth highlighting that despite the increases, all rates remain below the national average, with the 3 and 4 year old rate being on the funding floor. The early years workshop took place on the 13th of January. We had a positive discussion with early years providers on how the funding will be passed on. And finally, we include the high needs block just for completeness here, which is £156 million. Further details can be found on the high needs block in the following report. I think while we're looking at all the blocks, though, it is worth highlighting that the early years block is now greater than the high needs block. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Luke. Okay, colleagues, any questions? Thank you. We can see a handful. I can see Steve Barr first up and a number of other colleagues. So, Steve, your question first, please.
Well, there's a comment and a question actually on slightly different aspects of it. I mentioned TUCC, the meeting with the acting leader of the council and the chief exec on Tuesday, and we had a presentation from the director of finance on medium-term financial strategy for the county council, where he shared some of these figures that Luke's just gone through, and I would say he agreed that a 2.2% rise in the schools funding for the schools block in DSG was going to be really totally inadequate to do what schools want and should be doing. But as I say, that is a comment, and it was interesting that the Director of Finance agreed with that point. And something else that came out of that presentation was that he was very keen to share the good news that employers' contributions for pensions were going to go down, so schools would benefit from that. But it turned out, and I mention this now so that school leaders don't get too excited if it comes their way, that refers to the Staffordshire local government pension scheme, which will cover most support staff. But I certainly, unless anyone else knows better, I certainly have not come across any suggestion that the employer's contribution on the teachers' pension scheme is coming down, which would be even better news. So those are the comments. The question that I really wanted to ask was that I think it was last year, Alan, as chair, wrote to the Secretary of State to ask for the background and the reasons to the Secretary of State overturning the Schools Forum decision not to transfer the 0.5% to high needs block. My personal view is it'd be a waste of time to repeat that exercise, but it would make me feel better if the chair wrote to the Secretary of State to express Schools Forum's disappointment that the Secretary of State had seen fit to overturn what was, well, I think there was one abstention, but what was effectively a unanimous decision of the Schools Forum. It won't make any difference, but it would make me feel better. And I just wondered whether the chair and other members agreed with that.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'm always happy to write an angry letter. I mean, I agree with you in terms of the impact it will have, but I think it's just worth making the point. And I'd more than happily do that on behalf of the forum.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve Swatton.
Hi. Just for clarification, we were saying that the schools block is increasing by 2.2% in addition to the bits that are being rolled into it. So the gross amount is higher than 2.2. I just feel that it's definitely 2.2% of new money. Am I right?
Luke?
Yes, that is correct, Steve.
That's great. Because it makes quite a bit of difference. I know it implies that, but it's pretty crucial that we've got that confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Luke. Tim Hopkins.
It was a comment, and it was wearing the hat of the early years representatives who can't be here. It was just to say once again a big thanks from the sector for the funding workshop, and again just to reiterate that Staffordshire County Council and the team, and it was a massive team that is involved in this now. The early years section of the funding block is so high. They really have again historically taken into account those pressures and really aim to understand across all elements of early years. So whether that be maintained or private, voluntary and independent. And it was just to say once again some really sterling work that had gone on there to make sure that was evenly handed, and there was explanations given for absolutely everything. So thanks to Luke who's presenting this paper, but I know Luke will say that there's a massive team involved, and there certainly was.
Thank you, Tim. Duly noted. Thank you. Tom James.
Thank you. Thank you for also quantifying what the capping adjustment will be at 2.8%, because that was one of the queries that I did query as soon as this pack got circulated a week ago. I still do challenge and question how a cap and adjustment is a fair way of distributing funds from schools where needs have increased due to things like deprivation, free school meals, low private attainment funding increasing. So there's some schools that have been hit by that significantly over the past few years, and admittedly it's a high percentage the cap is this year. How it's done in Stoke is there's no capping adjustment, but they don't hit the 0% minimum funding guarantee. But ultimately what that means is that maybe reduction in funding overall is spread across the whole local authority or funding authority, rather than some schools being hit significantly where they've got significant changes to increases to deprivation and things like that, which does increase the per pupil amount legitimately.
Thank you, Luke. Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I can answer a little bit, I think. After I think Schools Forum have voted to adopt the national funding formula, and I think the cap is one of the few tools we have available to us to ensure that this is affordable. I think as well on the minimum funding guarantee, if we did lower that, I think that the maximum it would free up is about £80,000. So it doesn't really give us that much scope.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I've got a semi-rural small primary school that's had £129,000 taken off it in the last 2 years due to a capping adjustment. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so passionate about it. And that's just one instance. I'm sure there's countless others, but I'm surprised that it's only 80k. But thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, any other questions on this item? No. Okay. In that case, then we'll move on to the high needs block, which has obviously been foreshadowed by Luke. Sarah, over to you.
Okay. A moment. Okay. This is the high needs block update 2025-2026. As usual, this is the regular update report outlining the latest position on the high needs block given the ongoing pressures in this area. I won't go through the paper in full, as I presume forum members have already had an opportunity to read the paper. To summarise, the paper outlines that the Q3 high needs block forecast overspend is around £45 million, 3.4 million up from the previous Q2 forecast, but no change from the figure communicated at November forum. Key variances consist of an overspend of 17.8 million against the school top-up budget, which includes a rise in the number of children with EHCP AEN support in mainstream schools and academies, leading to an 8.9 million overspend. An overspend of 7.4 million in special schools and academies due to the combined impact of increasing demand and complexity. An overspend of 18.4 million in independent special schools, with numbers now in excess of 840, over 50% more than where they were just 3 years ago. An overspend of 3.9 million on independent mainstreams. This includes nursery-age pupils with EHCPs and schools that designate themselves as other independent schools, which are often similar in nature to independent special schools. An overspend of 3.3 million on alternative provision, which includes 0.8 million overspend on the Section 19 budget as a result of the reversal of the 2024-2025 charges, and an overspend of 2.1 million on post-16 due to rising numbers and costs. Importantly, the paper outlines the continued decline in the DSG reserve, which at the start of the year was in deficit by 53.6 million, and given the current overspend, will increase to nearly 100 million by the end of the year. Left unaddressed, the funding gap would likely increase, and by 2030-2031, Staffordshire's high needs block would be expected to be between 85 million and 115 million over budget, by which time our DSG deficit management plan shows that the accumulated deficit would be over £500 million. This remains a national concern, and the government has maintained the statutory override, requiring that accumulated DSG deficits should remain ring-fenced separate to the Council's other reserves through until the end of 2027-2028. This is effectively a temporary bank overdraft that will need to be repaid somehow. At its current level, the Council is already losing annual revenue returns of £4 million per annum in lost interest, and this will increase as the deficit grows, funding that would otherwise be available for delivering essential Council services. Based on our current forecasts, it's expected that by the end of 2026-2027, the deficit will be around £160 million. Central government has stated that local authorities will not be expected to fund future special educational needs costs from general funds once the statutory override ceases at the end of 2027-2028. However, they have also indicated that support provided to LAs will be linked to assurances, including that they are taking steps to make a reformed inclusive education system a reality. Details on supporting LAs with historic and accruing deficits and, importantly, the conditions for accessing such support are expected later in the local government finance settlement process. The Department for Education have also announced that they will be temporarily suspending the high needs national funding formula in 2026-2027, whilst also confirming that they will be reviewing the high needs funding system in future years to ensure that it properly supports a reformed SEND system. As a result, the government funding level next year for the high needs block will be around £156 million, 12.3 million higher than in 2025-2026. Which is equivalent to an 8.6% increase. Although on paper this is a substantial increase, in reality, the vast majority of the change represents a rolling in and annualisation of legacy grants. The settlement has effectively been frozen at 2025-2026 levels and is therefore £7 million worse than expected. Staffordshire's settlement clearly remains insufficient, and a further overspend is forecast in 2026-2027. As has already been mentioned today, following Schools Forum rejection of the 0.5% transfer from the schools block to the high needs block in November, the Council subsequently made a disapplication request to the Secretary of State. We can confirm that the government has approved our disapplication request, which is equivalent to around £3.6 million. This approval is contingent upon demonstrable evidence of enhancing inclusive mainstream provision, as well as investment in locally based provision and early intervention. Failure to provide satisfactory evidence or progress against these conditions will be taken into consideration when assessing any future requests. This will increase the overall high needs block budget next year to £159.6 million. But, given the settlement, it will come as no surprise that a further large overspend is expected next year of around £60 million, even after allowing for the additional 0.5% funding switch. Following publication of the high needs block allocations for 2026-2027, a decision to suspend withdrawal of special schools lump sum element from their budgetary allocation has been taken. This has been a long-standing part of Staffordshire's DMP. However, given the budgetary challenges faced across the system, further modelling will be undertaken to ensure that the overall budget for individual schools meets the minimum funding guarantee. The lump sum element special schools receive in 2026-2027 will be set at the same amount allocated in the 2025-2026 financial year, and it will remain at this amount in future years or until a further decision about this element of funding is taken. The government has set the MFG levels for 2026-2027 at 0% and have stated that legacy grants, for example the Core Schools Budget Grant, should continue to be passed on to special schools and PRUs, guidance which we will obviously be adhering to. As most of you will know, Staffordshire are part of the F40 group. They're a campaign group lobbying for major reform in education, backed by sufficient investment and a fairer distribution of funding so all children can thrive. Their analysis is showing that our 2026-2027 high needs block allocation on a per pupil basis is the 6th worst in the country. The F40 have recently released some campaign materials, including a pro forma letter that schools can use as a basis to lobby their local MP, should you wish to. A copy of this should be coming out to you in the next school's bag. I'll now pass over to Hallett to give a brief update on the rest of the report.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll pick up the items under the Send an AP strategy and Send an AP improvement plan. As Steve mentioned at the top of this meeting, we are expecting the white paper shortly, and I suspect sometime in early February is going to be the launch position. We will then have to respond to that white paper within 6 weeks with our plan of action to implement those recommendations. So a lot of work to be occurring in that space going forward. So I'll now turn attention to some of the work that sits within the Send an AP improvement plan and our Send strategy. I'll start off with the pre-statutory world. So we're continuing to implement our 3 main strategies, which are EAPDR, so the Enhanced Assess Plan Do Review pathway, and our CDIS support teams. We now have all 8 of those operational and at capacity and working really well. Evaluation indicates that the schools that receive CDIS support are viewing them as incredibly supportive. In fact, we've seen some of the interventions being cascaded from the individual schools that receive these methodologies into the academy chains in which they sit, which is really pleasing. And we're pulling those CDIS teams together internally to make sure that they've got the support they need to continue to deliver. The other elements of the pre-statutory, well, in fact, it sort of sits between the pre and the post-statutory, is our work that we're rapidly implementing around the provision of enhanced resource bases in mainstream schools. Now, we're reliably assured by the DFE that the development of enhanced provision in mainstream is probably going to be the direction of travel with the white paper, and we're keen to make sure that we're ahead of the curve in that regard. So we know that as of December the 12th, we have a draft specification for enhanced resource bases for SEND in mainstream that was co-produced with and by our mainstream and special school leaders, parent carer forum, specialist teachers, educational psychologists and commissioning officers from Staffordshire. Really pleased with those drafts, and they will form the basis on which we will go out to expressions of interest very shortly across Staffordshire for mainstream schools who wish to be supported to develop those enhanced provisions for children who have an EHCP, whose needs could be met in mainstream with that enhanced support. So we're looking, the end game here is between 40 and 50 of those enhanced provisions, hopefully commencing rollout of the first tranche of those provisions when ready, and we're anticipating September starts for the beginning of that, so September 2026. So it's a very exciting proposition for Staffordshire. It's something that we do need to sort of pick up the pace with, and we've got very good and co-produced plans to go forward. So I would urge colleagues to have those conversations in their academy groups, but also with their individual schools around interest to develop those provisions, and there is good financial strategic support to enhance those provisions. Just having a look at the pack and seeing whether there's anything else I need to pick up on. EAPDR is continuing. We're processing around 14 to 16 requests from our schools. EAPDR requests that are agreed at around 60 to 65%, and with the remaining requests that are not agreed, receiving feedback as to why they weren't agreed, largely because of the quality of graduated approach that's been demonstrated. And we are also making sure that CDIS teams are made available to those schools that require additional support with their graduated approach. What we have seen with our CDIS teams is that the Send and Inclusion hubs are making the highest number of requests for CDIS applications across the board here. So schools can access CDIS support without going through EAPDR as well. So on that note, I will leave it there and hand over to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Hallett. Before I open it up to the floor, Sarah, a quick question. On page 32.16, the approval of the clawback is contingent upon demonstrable evidence of enhancing inclusive mainstream provision. So, and then similarly, the second element to that, failure to provide satisfactory evidence of progress against these conditions will be taken into consideration whilst assessing any future requests. Is that against an existing framework, or is that against benchmarks that are going to be agreed?
Sarah, do you want me to pick
that's
that
basically, you can come in there. Go on then, Hallett.
Okay, if I've understood the question correctly. So what DFE are particularly interested in is the outcome evidence related to the work of the EAPDR and CDIS, and the progress that we're making in the enhanced resource-based provision, but also the long-established district inclusion model that we have in Staffordshire, which is fairly unique. So we are working at pace to make sure that we're agreeing those outcomes. Currently, I guess they're being assessed through our accelerated progress plan, and we had our 42nd month review on Friday, and we're awaiting the feedback from the departments, which should come within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Hallett. That's useful. Okay. Any questions for either Sarah or Hallett from colleagues? Again, put your electronic hand up if you have one. Tim?
I suppose it might be more of a comment than a question. Obviously, knowing that the white paper is going to land, and as Hallett said, it's going to be quite a pacey time period there for the local authority to make a response, as we know that government tend to do. It was just around that, wider collaborative working, which is always talked about in these reports and is so important. But just that, could those teams that are delivering the work, and it's such a big amount of work, also think about those school and setting leaders' well-being, because there were some instances around the Christmas period where consultations for places and places for schools that were received on the last school day and then into actually the school Christmas holidays, which obviously does cause an awful lot of uncertainty there for school leaders and governors like myself who are involved in those processes. Because everyone wants to work collaboratively, because they're all the same children that we look after. We all want those outcomes to be as positive as they can be.
Alice?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. I guess there are two things there. One is the consultation flurry that was seen in a couple of schools just before the Christmas holidays. We responded to that very quickly and reasserted the position around when consultations should go out, particularly around school holiday period. So my apologies for the blip there. Completely mindful of the well-being of our colleagues in schools and outside of schools. Yeah, I mean, I'm minded to be very careful with my words here, that we've seen a delayed white paper and all of a sudden we've got 6 weeks to respond to it. So I'll leave it there. We're meeting on Monday, several of us, to look at our methodology to engage the wider partnership, which would include everyone in this space. and we will be absolutely mindful that even though we've got 6 weeks to respond, we will be careful and judicious about how we approach that. I guess it's about getting a valid spread of ideas and views and engagement, and we will be as efficient and as careful as we can. You have my assurance.
It's so important that people do respond and support as well. It's essential at this period that we see ourselves in as well. Thank you.
Let's see what's in the white paper.
Thank you, Hallett. Thank you, Tim. Any other questions? Yeah, Tim, you want to come in?
I just wanted to pick up on Sarah's comments around the F40. And Sarah did say that all of the information that we'd received from F40, it should have been the campaign this week, or it is the campaign this week. On Monday, there was a meeting with MPs in Parliament. All of that information will go out in the school bag. It will be in the school bag tomorrow. And again, I urge colleagues to follow up on the opportunity to use the letter that's in the bag, that's been pre-prepared, or a similar letter to your MPs, so that as the white paper is being published, then they can see the urgency, particularly from a Staffordshire perspective, around the funding that we receive.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, any other questions or any other points? No. Okay, then that leaves me to move on to item 9, which is the date of the next meeting and the work programme. And obviously the next meeting is on Teams on Thursday the 26th of March, and the work programme has been published previously as well. Simon, any other points?
Just to say that I will add in that item to the work programme that Steve requested. I'll take that up with Tim outside of the meeting for the most appropriate date.
Okay, that draws us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much again for your time and input, colleagues, and we will see you in March. Thanks very much.